חברים יקרים, אנחנו מתחילים היום ובכל שבת בבוקר לחזור
Dear friends, we are starting today and every Friday evening, Saturday morning, we'll be watching the teaching of the Sefirot with Rabash. We're starting with part 6, the text of the Ari, item 4. We will read it together from the teaching of the Sefirot, second volume, part 6. Item 4, the text of the Ari.
ותחילה הוציא אורות מאב הכולל הפנימי, שהוא השערות של הכתר.
Afterward, it elicited the external phases to clothe it. First, it elicited lights from the general.
ואחר כך הוציא
which is the Sefirot of the Keter surrounding its Rosh from the outside up to the Metzach and up to the Oznaim. Afterward, it elicited the Sefirot of the Zakan, beard, that are extended from the general sac called Nikodim, from which the general 3 mochin in it were made. And now we're going to enter a lesson of Rabash.
There is equivalence with light there. Just listen. Just listen without questions. If he says so, if everything is below Tabor is related to Vak, Zon, and since the second aviyut, coarseness from 2 to 1, and then the kelim are filled, the vessels are filled with Vak of Sag. Is that clear? He asked a question here. What resemblance does it mean that Vak, it is Vak? This is Vak of phase 4 and it's Vak of phase 2. How can you say that there's equivalence between them? And he asks, do you understand the question here? Just listen. The answer is, if there's equivalence between Gar and Vak, and that's enough. But when the light shines, and it's not clear that this is a small degree or it's a large degree, the vessels, he says they need to have equivalence between Gar and Vak. But once the vessel has equivalence with Vak, it can already receive Vak. But this is a small degree, and while the light shines, it is not apparent that it is a small degree. You just need to listen. If so, how do we distinguish phase 2, phase 3, phase 4? And if that light shines there, and there's no distinction at all, but we see big differences, great distinctions. The answer is when the light departs and the record, Reshimo, remains, and the record has a difference between the big, the great degree and the small degree. And with the light, it's different otherwise. Why? If we say the light is called eternal and doesn't have any deficiency in it, then at the moment the light comes, and it already has a deficiency, and it is no longer called. And that's why it stands on some degree, and the light is obligated to fill it to the full measure. And from here it follows that the equivalence must be between Gar and Vak in order to be able to receive the light. And once the light is received, there is no longer difference. And here, you understand? You don't understand. Here you can ask questions about it. There's no difference between the light is called completeness. And there is a deficiency. It's no longer called light. Do you understand this explanation? You can ask about that. The main thing is there. And here there's a great question that's asked. He tells us there is a difference between these kalim. When the Partzuf of Galgalta left and the vessels remained empty and the record remained inside, and there's a deficiency of light. And Chaim Vital is asking this question in the Tree of Life. But in the second expansion, when this coarse light comes and fills the vessel, the answer is that only the light of Chokhmah in the vessel of Keter and the light of Bina in the vessel of Chokhmah, it doesn't have its own light in the vessel of Keter. Only in light of Chokhmah. It lacks in Keter. This is why we say when the light is shining, there is no deficiency. So how can we call it that there is a difference? There's another way to explain it, that the Reshimah that remained there, but this record is not yet revealed. For example, we say that the vessel of Keter has the coarseness of 3 and it has the light of Chokhmah, but Gimel of Hitlapshut, the 3 of the clothing remained there, remained in the vessel, and it's not receiving the filling. So what is happening here? When we are speaking of the Partzuf Galgalta, there is a record of zone there of 4-3. And now zone comes of 1 and 2. Let's say Ma and Bon, the level of 2. We can also say that Ma and Bon, 4-3, do not receive fulfillment, but only Ma and Bon of the second phase. And if so, it's the same thing. They don't receive filling. But we must say that there is indeed some difference. And here, it is assumed that when the light shines, it is not apparent which one is small degree or great degree. This is a bit difficult, complicated. What are you asking? How does Ab fill the empty vessels? And it also says what records remain there? 4-3. No, you are right. 4-3. So 4. So what do we receive? We come to 4-3. About this, no, this is not it. No, this is not the correct Dalit Gimel. The correct one is, and here there is Dalit Gimel, Zon of 4-3, Vak of 4-3, Ma and Bon of 4-3. And the light that comes now is Ma and Bon at 3 and 2. We can say on 3-2, when they was weakened from which level? Level of Bina. Let me say it differently. This is Ma and Bon. This is Ma and Bon. This is Ma and Bon that remained there from phase 2, Sag. But you're right. We can ask another one more degree. With this, we can explain. Look, when we say Partzuf Galgalta had, in other words, phase 4, the entire phase 4 was weakened or refined. Yes? Then another question comes up. What's remaining, Golgotha? Only the correct 2, 3. That remains. There's no 4. 4 was refined. So what's a record? It's what was impressed by some degree. In other words, it can right now overcome itself. If we're speaking about the coarseness of this coarseness of the root. 4, can it try to bestow? What does it want? Only simply 3. What the Tabor of Golgotha? What do you want? It's not that the record remained, that the record of 4 of clothing that remains. But remember that don't forget that there's nothing that remains. I'm not speaking of Ab. In principle, Golgotha, nothing remains. Just think. The question is, so when I say that a coupling was made, a zivug, on the coarseness of 3, and that's 3, but that's not 3, that's in 4. With who does it remain? For Ab or for Golgotha? I ask. For Golgotha, what do you want? I hear you're asking me if I'm saying that only the coarseness except the coarseness of phase 3? Listen, we learn when the light departs and the record remains from the vessels, yes or no?
Yes.
What record remains? More from the clothing? The clothing remains? But the coarseness does not remain. If so, can I say that afterward the light of Chokhmah comes, the coarseness of 3, that's called vessel of Keter. Why is it called deficiency? Because the deficiency is in the record of 4 of clothing, and it remained there and did not receive any filling. So now what is there? There are records that remain below the Tabor of Golgotha. Vak 4, 3. That is, what is Vak 4, 3? Once more, above the Tabor, it is filled through the Ab and Sag, and below the Tabor, which is called the Vak, it's not yet filled. So what kind of records remain in those? Kalim, 4 of clothing, but only Vak of 4 of clothing and Vak of 3 of coarseness in the vessels that are below the Tabor of Vak. And then we learn that in the Nekudot of Sag, what is the height of the level of the Nekudot of Sag below the Tabor? Also, Ma and Bone, Vav, He, but they are with what coarseness? Of the phase 2? So he asks, what do you mean that there is equivalence between Vak of 2 and Vak of 3? Well, this is 3 and this 2. So, but he explains here that when the light shines, it's not possible to differentiate which is that it's smaller degree. But then when is it possible to differentiate that it's a smaller degree? When the light departs. That's when you can differentiate that it's a smaller degree, but for now he shines as it was. So then the question is here, when the light shines on the coarseness of 3 in Partsuf Ab, the record of 4 remains that did not receive the filling. So what is the difference? He asked this question. And we say that Ab fills the coarseness of 3 and remained in Partsuf Galgalta. Sag fills coarseness of 2 that remained in the Bet of Aviyut, that remained in the Partsuf Ab, and we say that Sag fulfills it. Who? 3. How? We can explain it in the same way that he explains here. When the light shines from Keter, you asked here who, with Ab, which is to Galgalta. Just 3, we said Galgalta is filled by Ab and Sag. What does Sag have? 2. And how can 2 fill 3 that is inside Galgalta? What does he explain? As long as it does not shine, it's not called a smaller great degree. In the light, there is no deficiency. So then what's called a deficiency? When the light departs, that's how it is written.
Now let's move to the next part of the lesson, but first we will sing a song.
התהללו בשם קודשו, ישמח לב מבקשי השם, ישמח לב מבקשי השם, התהללו בשם קודשו, התהללו בשם קודשו, ישמח לב מבקשי השם.